Esperanza
Well, hello, Irwin.
in a, to tell we have to tell our audience, we did take a brief hiatus, so we've been off for a few weeks.
Are we
Um,
rusty?
eh, eh, I don't know. We're gonna find out if we're rusty. I mean, that's a really good question, but
I don't think so.
um, nah, we're
Because we're old friends. We pick up where we left off.
that's exactly right, and that's a very good point about old friends. Like you ever have like an old friend, and I feel that way about you, like somebody you don't see them for a year and then you see them and it's like nothing ever
It's like
changed.
no time passed. Yep, exactly.
Exactly. And that's and
Yeah.
yeah, so
But
that's
in this case, what we're talking about today, kind of a lot of change.
oh my gosh. What a segue. That is a
I mean, I don't know. I think so, but let's
a
launch.
lot
Let's
has
go
changed,
in,
but
get
we
into
should
it.
tell our audience we're talking about, I mean, this is one of the most arguably one of the most famous estates out here. It was called, but we'll get into that in a
That's one
minute,
of the big changes.
which is one of the big changes. We'll get into that in a minute because the estate was known as Fordune. Now, that would be Fordune. And this was the estate of the Ford family, Henry Ford, Ford Motor Cars. I mean, that doesn't get much bigger than that. Esperanza, I think we're going to start at the back end of this first before we get a little bit into the history, because
From present to past.
from present to past, we're going to go that way, I think, because in October of 2021, this was the highest recorded sales price for a single parcel on the East End of $105 million. And by the way, it was originally asking 175 million, which I always laugh at this kind of thing because I guess places like this, Esperanza, they really don't have any comparables. So it's sort of
Right.
like,
Yeah.
well,
What is the comp?
what's the comp to Fordune? Okay, 42 acres with nearly a quarter mile on the ocean. They used to call this Southampton, but it's actually
It
Watermill.
is Watermill. Well, it's
It
part of Southampton town.
part
I
of
mean, but
Southampton town,
yeah,
but it's actually Watermill. But we'll get into why they call it Southampton a little later. But
it's fancier.
so this was the longest stretch of private oceanfront. And again, when you have something like this, there really isn't a comp. You throw, hey, let's make up a number and see what we get. So it ultimately sold for $105 million. There was a 3-acre parcel in East Hampton, I believe, on Further Lane that sold for $147 million, but that was 3 parcels. So this one is a sort of a standalone. And we want
And
to
this is
thank.
42 acres.
That is 42 acres of, yeah, I mean, an
I mean, it's a
incredible,
bargain. Oceanfront, 42 acres.
a
It's a
tremendous
bargain.
bargain. But the real bargain, and we'll get into this a little bit later, was when the property was first sold. But we'll touch on that soon. But so again, we're going to start from the back. So remember, October 2021, $105 million. We're getting a lot of this information from 2 articles actually written by Laura Euler, that's Euler, one of them from dirt.com and the other from our friends at Behind the Hedges, which Taylor Vesey is the editor of. So, but both of these were from Laura, so we thank her. And we're going to start by going by the first one she wrote, which was the Behind the Hedges article in 2020. And I think we should start really almost from, sort of early on, how the wedding of the century. Get a load of that one. The wedding. I thought your wedding was the wedding of the century, Esperanza, but apparently not according to Laura Euler. It was
Well, mine
really
was scantily attended
it
on
apparently
purpose.
it apparently was the wedding of Henry Ford II and, get a load of the way they record this one in 1940, the pretty blonde Anne McDonnell. Anyway, 2 great U.S. industrial fortunes would join that year in Southampton, Long Island on July 13th. And again, Laura goes on to say, we don't have to spend much time on the Fords. We know who they are. Henry Ford II, eldest son of Edsel Ford, grandson of Henry Ford, president of Ford Motor Company from 45 to 60. during which time they became publicly traded, where they really must have hit the windfall.
This was the time of like Ford versus Ferrari, right?
Right. And really, it was the time of the big three. It was Ford, Chrysler,
Right.
and General Motors.
Right,
There was,
right.
Toyota, Honda. There was no real presence at that point, at this era in the United States. But
Oh, buy American.
Buy American. It was a different, different time, different place. And Anne McDonnell apparently was the daughter of stockbroker James McDonnell, granddaughter of a Thomas Murray. How about this as an inventor? Guy invented the dimmer switch and the screw and fuse. That's the kind of stuff. It's so unglamorous, but must have created zillions of dollars.
Right, but he also developed electric power plants, and obviously his fortune, which was vast, came from diversifying his holdings.
Exactly correct. And apparently, according to Laura Udell, the McDonnell Murrays were some of the first Irish Catholics in Southampton. Before the 20s, it was very much a WASP domain, still sort of has that reputation, maybe not the same way it does. And I love this, what Laura brings out in this article, how legend has it that the Southampton Bathing Corporation only admitted Murray as a member because he invented some sort of filtration device to keep sand from flowing into the pool along with the salt water. And the Bathing Corp wanted to use it. You got to love this, right?
Yes. Same kind of thing happens nowadays, I think. Huh?
Completely true. But I mean, now we know about the Fords, but I mean, again, the McDonnell Murrays, I mean, their house in Southampton, 50 rooms, a pool, tennis court, polo field. In New York, 29 rooms. I mean, this is, again, we've gone over these kind of, people before in other episodes.
Living large in history. Yeah.
Does living large even scratch this? This is like, and again, it's not new and not exclusive just to Eastern Long Island. We had
it's like people adulate royalty, British royalty, let's just say, and to me, this is their version of it in this country. This is our nobility.
This is
you just have to amass a big, huge fortune, and you become landed gentry or something like that. I don't know.
It's right, because I mean, again, this was not some old waspy kind of thing. This was, again, Irish Catholics. I'm very, very different. Some of the first, again, that went into Southampton at this time. This was really had a very different kind of thing. But I got to tell you, Laura brought out this line in the article, and I always wondered about this street, Squabble Lane in Southampton.
Yes.
What I say, I used to say to myself, it's an unusual kind of name. There is a Murray Lane, which I'm going to assume is because of the Murray family.
Maybe related. Yeah.
Yeah. But Squabble Lane, because again, this family eventually owned 300 acres of oceanfront in Southampton and Watermill. And Squabble Lane got its name because it separated the two factions of the family and the family infighting. So very cool story right there.
Big Irish Catholic family and no fighting. I mean, come on, that's
exactly. I mean, that's the story would be if they weren't fighting.
Exactly. Yeah, precisely.
But so again, and we get into this whole thing, how there was high excitement in Southampton approaching this wedding. The Etzel Fords arrived in Southampton. They anchored their yacht in Peconic Bay. Even old Henry showed up to dance with the bride. So, I mean, this was, they were also living large in Michigan, Grosse Pointe, which is that Detroit suburb where all the automakers used to live. 40-something room red brick mansion on the shore of Lake St. Clair.
Right. This is after their marriage, obviously.
Yes, exactly. But as
they weren't
Laura,
living in.
It's so true. I mean, like hunting. Esperanza, and we've discussed this kind of thing on our Hamptons before. It really is hard to sort of wrap your arms around the way these people live. And we discussed this with the Bell Estate. We discussed this with Bayberryland. And, it's hard to fathom. And it just the grandeur of it all, but hey. But for a summer home, Esperanza, only Southampton would do.
Well, of course. Right.
Now, they originally purchased the beautiful Halcyon Lodge on Gin Lane, an 1893 example of stick style architecture. And in 51, they commissioned, I mean, you want to talk about,
this is amazing, by the way.
I gotta be,
right.
This is, we talk about Andrew Geller. We talk about a lot of these modernist architects out here. Philip Johnson, I mean, could be the father of modernist architecture. I mean, they hired him to design a glass pavilion addition to the house, which is still there today. But of course, Halcyon Lodge.
Hopefully.
Hopefully, yeah, we should say that. I mean, this article is a couple of years old. We're hoping it's still there. I'm going to go with the assumption that it is, but apparently, Halcyon Lodge wasn't enough for these people. Stick style architecture from the 1890s, a Philip Johnson addition. This didn't suffice. So they sold it. And they did ask the buyers if they could dismantle the glass box and take it, and that didn't happen. How do you leave Halcyon Lodge, Esperanza, on Gin Lane?
Because they outgrew it. I mean, did they reproduce? I don't know.
Well,
I don't know. It doesn't say how many rooms and, everything that was, but clearly it wasn't big enough.
Apparently not.
Or grand enough.
Or grand enough. I mean, but again, I look, this is lifestyle that's hard to relate to, obviously. And, again, this is not.
Yeah. Remember Robin Leach?
We should have, if he was alive, we could add him as a guest on this podcast, right? Throwing that loud voice of his own. But now the Fords were, as Laura describes in her article, ambitious. And they were in the 50s, late 50s. Again, now another Our Hamptons buzzword, not ancient history, late 50s.
Yeah.
They began planning a brand new house, but they had to spend so many years buying all of these parcels of land. That's another thing, Esperanza. We got to stop for a second. Again, now late 50s, so we're talking 60 plus years ago.
Yeah. Well, this is just all farmland, by the way. I mean, this was not, that's why it was probably easy to buy all this land.
Right. You can't, to state the very obvious, accumulate contiguous parcels of land anymore. That's non-existent. You can't do this. You can't, there's nothing left. There's not enough land left to create estates like Fordune was.
Well, yeah. And I mean, also, obviously nobody wants, well, they might want 300 acres, but nowadays they buy the 42 acre and then they plant the most enormous house that they can, a la Renner, so.
Correct. Or as our dear friend Jane Maring always points out on Building Kind East Hampton, shout out to Jane, you just buy a 1 acre lot and clear the hell out of it.
Right. Yeah.
But we won't go down that road just yet. But in the late 50s, the Fords began planning this grand house.
Yep.
Difficult to say, it's hard to say how much money they spent, how many parcels they combined and purchased all over the place. But in 1957, Sports Illustrated, we'll get to this later, they put together a great article on the whole East End of Long Island in 1957. That's going to be a podcast in and of itself. But
right,
there's
Sports
a lot
Illustrated.
Yeah, it's hard to. All right, full disclosure, since we share everything with our audience, I've been looking at this article, and it's an extensive article from 1957, pages and pages, and it's just all about Eastern Long Island. So we're going to do something about.
We're going to dive into that one. Yeah,
we're going to dive into that down the road. But so anyway, they inhabited. Henry Ford II wanted to build this showplace, and he had to lay a mile of blacktop through the fields of rye to reach this land. To your point, it was farmland, which blankets, this 100 acres, a portico with 4 large baskets of cement fruit, whole paneled rooms, fireplaces, parquet floors. A European chateau in the style perfected by the Vanderbilts.
So it really was. It like looked like a French chateau. It was
Apparently,
like a classical sort of
apparently,
inspired
and and and
architecture.
and it's funny. Even the name Fordune, which obviously we're combining Ford and Dune, but even that has Fordune.
Yes, exactly. Exactement. Exactement.
Yeah, right. It almost
Mais
has that
oui.
kind of exactly right. We always reach out to Esperanza for the European accent.
Yes,
She
yes.
spent more time in Europe than I have, so she's good on that.
That's from Canada, the French.
Okay, well, I'm trying to make this more glamorous than it is here, but
Sorry.
okay, it is from Canada.
We're talking about the Fords, you know.
That's true.
They had a
That's true.
hunting lodge in Ontario. It's okay.
So at a certain point, Sports Illustrated estimated that they already spent some $800,000 on this land, which is, of course, peanuts compared to
Laughable in today's
laughable what it's worth now. But again, I mean,
yeah.
$800,000 meant something in the late 50s.
Yes, exactly.
They already had over 1,000 feet on the beach, but they wanted to add more. But I love this, Esperanza. The Ford property was not the highest rated for taxes in Southampton. It was the DuPont home on Meadow Lane, currently still, I think, the home of Calvin Klein.
The property,
God
yeah.
only knows,
I mean, he's, demolished and rebuilt that like 15 times, it feels like.
Yeah, yeah. Now, Nick, this is funny. The massive house, remember when we're talking about, is 16,000 square feet. Now, it's called massive here, Esperanza. 16,000 square feet, sort of.
That's peanuts. It's nothing.
It's done here now.
Is that GFA?
Yeah.
Does that have a livable basement area? Lower level?
Well, to answer that question, in addition to the 48-foot living room, the French parquet floors, the three wings of the main house, one being servants and guests, one a kitchen, library. There was also, of course, the beautiful gardens, the ponds plural, rolling lawns, pool, tennis court.
But no polo field.
Nope.
What is amazing to me, though, is that, he had spent to date, let's just say maybe $1 million, 800,000. But the house cost 2.3 million to build and furnish.
Right. I mean, 2.3 million really bought you something back then, right?
It gives me pause. 1950s. Wow.
But as is often the case, they didn't really get to enjoy this estate because I guess from the files of apparently money doesn't buy happiness, Esperanza. These two, Anne and Henry, divorced in 1964. Anne got the estate.
She got the goods.
Both eventually remarried. So all of that work, all of that effort, for what? And here's the thing that really got me, Esperanza, because again, not ancient history. 1975. Honestly, the 70s, okay?
Yeah.
Anne sold this estate to an Italian financier who paid the incredibly, to me, this even sounds cheap for 1975 out here on 42 acres.
I agree. No, it is. I think so.
$1.8 million.
Mm-hmm.
And this is Fordune, 42 acres. He subdivided the house. Carlo Traglio, that's the person who bought it, subdivided it, kept the main house and 44 acres of oceanfront. And then he divided into a gated enclave, 40 homes. Hilton's owned one of them. The name of the enclave, Fordune, of course, which is inexplicably now called Jewel Pond.
So this is, I'm just trying to think, between Southampton and Watermill. So it's on the eastern end of Southampton.
Right.
This is sort of like as you leave the hospital, Southampton Hospital, and you're driving near the ocean there, that's
Yeah,
the Jewel Pond area, isn't it?
that's what I would. Yeah, I mean, because at first I thought, was
Like
this
that's
like,
all like Halsey Land, basically,
yeah,
right?
like
It was
I was trying to put this on a map. I mean, is this like around? This is not on the side of Flying Pond Point Road,
point.
am I correct?
Well, I think before then,
Yeah,
sort
right.
of
To
between, let's say, between the hospital and Flying Point.
right to sort of to the west of it, sort of to the west of it.
Exactly.
But we do want to just. Wow, Esperanza, I'm thinking about this now. This episode has gone from present day to the past, into when Anne ultimately sold the estate. But we do have to backtrack just a little bit, really
Back
into the
into the
mid
60s.
to the 60s, because this almost like a standalone episode within this episode, but it's really something, that we uncovered when Esperanza and I were researching this article. A 1964 New York Times story of how Linda Bird Johnson, now, for all of you millennials and younger people out there and whatnot, LBJ, was the president after JFK was shot. They had two daughters, LBJ and his wife. One of them was called
Lady
Linda
Bird
Bird.
was
Right.
LBJ's wife, right? It was
Right.
confusing to me, all these LBJs.
Right. Right. Wasn't LBJ's wife called Lady Bird, Esperanza?
Yeah, she was Lady Bird, and this
Okay.
is Linda Bird.
Linda Bird Johnson. But anyway, they had, which I guess was a fundraiser for LBJ or some kind.
Uh-huh.
In 1964 on Fordune, a little bit east of Southampton, but again, this is something, Esperanza, we always love to transport ourselves back to a time and a place. Now, let's go back to 1964. Very conservative, stiff Southampton, right? Is that fair to say? I mean, 1960s, 58 years ago was,
yeah, I think
probably a more
overall, but I've always found there was a underlying quirkiness out here, so
okay,
not sure.
But Esperanza, let me ask you, as this New York Times article is going to ask us, you think it was quirky enough in this area to have, as the New York Times described, a guitar snapping, twangy voiced hillbilly singers, and as they described, which seemed like spittoons in a boudoir in the middle of Fordune? Because this party, Esperanza, was sort of like a hootenanny.
So yeah, and I'm trying to think with this French chateau style 22-room white brick mansion, right?
Exactly.
As the backdrop of elegance to the Texas hoedown.
To the Texas hoedown. Granted, it was for the president. Apparently, it was an LBJ barbecue in honor of Miss Linda Bird Johnson, who was the then 20-year-old daughter of the president. And the New York Times describes it as, Esperanza, never before had the estate been opened up to anything but small private parties. But the two white wooden gates at the entrance were flung wide, and nearly 2,000 people drove in for this political fundraiser. The grounds on Wickapog Road, a stout gentleman in a string bolo tie, pointed leather shoes, a cowboy shirt. Come on, this was not going on in Southampton here. I mean,
not on a daily basis, I'm sure.
I would say, I would say that's accurate, Esperanza. Definitely not on a daily basis. Walter Jetton of Fort Worth, a thrower of commercial barbecues, who has served spare ribs on the president's ranch. And again, the Times saying, it is doubtful that this area of superb and moneyed elegance had seen anything comparable to Mr. Jetton's putting on what he called, let me put on my Esperanza.
On your best Texan.
I have never really done Texan, Esperanza, but for you, I'm going to try a real big feed.
Coming from a Queens boy.
Exactly. Texas by way of Queens. Oh my gosh.
I love this, that the New York Times says, that this is clearly a like a filet mignon, a
Right.
filet crowd, a filet country.
A filet mignon crowd all of a sudden getting
Their spare
Texas
rib
style
fix.
ribs.
Oh man.
So, wow, this is really though. You want to talk about a moment in time? I mean, this Mr. Jet and Esperanza, 3 refrigerated trucks, 15 in staff, baked beans, potato. This is not staples of Southampton society, okay?
Right.
No question. I mean, baked beans, potato salad, baking.
No, a clam bake would have been more our style, right?
I would think so. Okay, now the hundreds of ears of corn on the cob, that I could
Hopefully that was local. They didn't bring it from Texas.
Yeah, and Esperanza, you think Bridgehampton loam was part of the potato salad, or you think this?
I gotta say they had to source this stuff locally, please.
Please, God, but if there was a God at the time, hopefully yes. But oh my gosh, but I like this description, Esperanza. Sturdy women, sturdy, whatever that means. Okay.
That's a euphemism.
We're going to say it's a euphemism. Yeah, this is 1964, folks. I mean, I don't know if they'd use the word sturdy today, but anyway, sturdy women took frozen apple turnovers out of the trucks in wooden trays, boiling them in deep fat, and served up 4,000 hot fried
pies. Hot fried pies.
Come on. How about Texas twang circa Venezuela? Come on, everybody. Do that again, Esperanza. Our audience
fried pies.
We're really going off.
I had family. I had family in Texas, and my husband has family in Texas. We're okay.
Did you have a hot fried pie there?
I had hush puppies. Even better.
Okay, that's authentic.
Yeah,
that's authentic. So guests were received here. I mean, portable barbecue pits had been set up. 400 pounds of pork ribs were cooked in slabs. Okay. 700 pounds of barbecued briskets. The party started at 5 o'clock. By 7:30, there wasn't a rib or a chicken wing left.
I wonder if they had a special events permit. I mean, 2,000 people, really.
2,000 people. Yes. And again, this is.
And it was all free. It was a fundraiser, but it was.
Oh,
wait, no. 1,900 guests paid $15 each or $25 a couple. Okay. And gross receipts ran around 22,000. Right. Beer, but no liquor was served.
Right.
And there was a sponsor. Okay. Young Citizens for Johnson. And they were going to get the net proceeds. So, okay, I see the fundraising aspect of it. And, $15, $25, that's a bit of money then.
No, I would definitely say so. And, your hosts were Miss Charlotte Ford, the 22-year-old daughter of Henry Ford II. And she was the hostess. And the host was
none other than
Paul
drum
Newman.
Roll, Paul Newman, because he'd got off the racetrack in Bridgehampton and went over to eat some spare ribs.
And he did use that racetrack in Bridgehampton.
He certainly did.
You're exactly right. That's wow. Give props to Esperanza tying that in. And that's a good one. We like that. And true. And the other daughter, Lucy, the president's 2 daughters, again, Lucy. Hey, did Lucy have a nickname like Linda Bird? I mean, or she was just Lucy Baines?
Well, they're all LBJ, though. That's the main thing, right?
Right. Exactly right.
I did not know that, but now I do. We learn something new.
Yeah, you do learn something new every day. So, Miss Johnson, who at the time, here we go again, an attractive college sophomore. Okay. Quiet, charm, and ease. She made a brief speech. We got to remember, this is imagine this. Got to give props to Lucy Baines Johnson, a 17-year-old young woman at the time, but of such breeding that she's making a speech in front of 2,000 people at
Well, I
a.
think it was Linda that made the speech, right? Because it was being held in her honor. I'm going to guess it was Linda, who,
Okay. Okay. Who?
nonetheless was 20 years old and unfazed apparently by the
Oh, yes.
2,000 strong
Exactly.
crowd.
Exactly. And amongst the guests, John Steinbeck and his wife, Huntington Hartford. I don't know who that was, unless it's Hartford Insurance. Who
Hartford
knows?
Insurance, maybe.
I
Yeah.
would think, yeah. But so that's sort of almost.
That closed an era, I think, right? Because I mean, if you think about it, mid 60s, but they had 10 more years almost. But I would imagine this was the biggest blowout party they ever had on that property and
Yeah,
ever will.
I would certainly think so. And again, just to go back and think about that for a minute, my gosh, I mean, this had to be. I should really look up an old Southampton Press or East Hampton Star and
Oh
see if
yeah,
this
they
thing
must
was
have covered
covered,
it. Oh, for sure.
how it was covered. I mean, this was an extensive article in the New York
Yeah.
Times about it,
Yeah.
from 1964. But I'm sure there was some coverage out here. And there's no mention of Southampton Village Police. Again, I don't know if this estate, maybe part of this, Esperanza was
Had
in the
their own.
village of Southampton, part of it was outside. I don't know, but
Yeah.
apparently no police presence. No,
Probably had their own. They probably had their own security
I would
and
think so.
Secret Service and the whole nine yards. Yeah.
And there was actually an Esther Cooper Smith whose job. How about this is your job? What do you do for a living? I'm the national coordinator of barbecues for the Johnson campaign. That's actually a job. Her hobby, and she wrote here, was raising money. And again, $22,000, on a one afternoon event,
Yeah.
in 1964. That was money.
Yeah. Yeah.
Esperanza. That was fun.
Yeah, that was the heyday of Fordune, I guess, and now known as God, Jewel Pond. How dare they?
I it's like there are so many there are houses out here that have classic names and they've transferred over the years, and why would you change the name? I mean, but
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well,
I
I
don't
mean,
know.
it's like Hampton Bays, good ground.
Very true. Very
I don't
true.
know.
I know we're recording this episode at 10:20 in the morning, Esperanza, but I got to be honest, I sort of have a hankering for a hot fried pie right now.
Well, maybe Havens Beach, one of those summer carnivals will come by and you can grab something really deep fried there
And
and pretend.
and by the way, Esperanza, do I get props for throwing in the word hankering?
Hankering, yeah. I'm
Hankering, even
hankering.
better. That Texas, she's got a better Texas twang than me. I'm jealous.
Y'all, he's hankering.
But I do have a hankering for one of those hot fried pies. I really do. It's Esperanza, yet another
Yes.
crazy story of this crazy place we love. Esperanza, we're not going to run out of stories.
No, never. And
See,
by the way, the Fords are still out here. There's still some Fords out here.
You had mentioned that
Yeah.
there are still some Fords out here. So yeah, I mean, why would you leave?
Right.
Exactly. Yeah. Esperanza, a pleasure. Thanks a ton.
Lots of fun. Thanks, Irwin.
Until next time.
Indeed.